Hi, I'm Warren Sprang. I've been doing solar imaging for about 14 years and animations of solar activity for about the same amount of time, and was asked about doing another tutorial on this. This is not very professional done, but kind of a quick and dirty how I do my animations. I use specific programs. If you are already experienced in imaging solar, you probably have your own workflow. I use Firecapture for capturing. I use Autostakkert 4 for stacking and aligning the images. I use ImPPG for most processing on each sear that I have captured. I use Photoshop for additional processing. And then I use PIPP for producing the GIF animation. You can use other capture programs, you can use other processing programs, etc. I'm just showing you the methods I use. Everything that I use here is free except for, of course, Photoshop. Some people use GIMP for some of the things I use Photoshop for, but just wanted to give you a heads up on which programs I use, the steps I take to make my animations, and hopefully you'll find this beneficial. So here we'll go. I was asked recently to produce another tutorial on how I do my animations since my other tutorial is pretty much out of date. You'll have to pardon the beeps because I'm recording as I record this actually, but I wanted to do a kind of down and dirty, what steps do I take to produce an animation of activity on the sun, etc. Okay, you can see my Firecapture window is open right now. That's how I do my captures. Doesn't matter if you use Firecapture, any other capture program, whatever you're doing. I'm kind of assuming you already know how to take images of the sun. We're not going to go into how to tune your scope, etc. We're going to assume you know how to do all of that stuff, how to use Autostakkert and everything. So I wanted to keep this as simple as possible. So in this case, you can see I've selected a particular ROI, region of interest, because this uses less memory than doing an entire disk. Yes, you're going to miss some activity possibly on another part of the disk. This is just how I do it. I typically use auto run for Firecapture to do the captures automatically. You can see I've got the bullseye reticle set up on a small filament. That is telling me where the center is that I want to keep everything centered on the animation. And I'm using a Hinode guider at the moment to keep things tracking as I perform the captures. I typically set up to do anywhere from 160 to 320 captures, and of course all this relies on what are the clouds doing, how's the scene going, etc. You can set the number of captures, etc., how many you want in Firecapture. Also, I put a 30-second delay between each capture, and each capture I set for 500 frames. Some people set it for a particular time, like 10 seconds, 20 seconds, etc. I select 500 frames. It doesn't matter. It's what you're used to and what you want to use. I do 500 frames. It takes about 6 seconds, excuse me, to capture one frame of one sear for a frame of the animation. And I just set this to go continuously until I want to stop. Once I have captured all the sears I want, I bring the files into Autostakkert by going to the file, and it was on the west, and I highlight all the sears that I want to process. And I'll make a point for analyzation. I use crop, automatic quality, always on surface, analyze, and then once I've got that, I'll automatically place the alignment points, make sure they're covering the proms and the edge and the surface, and then just hit stack. And this takes the most amount of time of all the processing. It can take 30 minutes, hours, depending upon how many sears you have. So we'll pause the recording at this point in time and start it back up once this is finished. Once I've finalized all of my sears in Autostakkert, having them aligned and stacked, I'll bring it into a program called ImPPG where I do most of the processing on each frame. I start by opening up one of the frames from Autostakkert, and you'll see you have a selection window here. You can either use for a selection around a small spot, or in my case, I like to select the entire screen so I see the histogram the way it's supposed to be. And utilizing the sliders, I will change the settings to sharpen up the image a little bit. I don't want to go too far. You go too far, it gets crunchy. And I'll adjust the curve just a little bit, bring out some of the things. I like this. So I'm going to save my processing settings. You can see I've made one already, West Limb. So we've saved those processing settings. Next, we will go to batch processing. We'll add all the files, the TIFFs, from Autostakkert. So we'll collect all those files, bring them in. We'll select the processing we want, and then we'll make a file for the ImPPG images. Select that folder and start processing, and ImPPG will automatically start processing every one of those TIFFs that was output by Autostakkert. So I'll pause here so you don't have to watch this, and we'll come back when it's ready to finish. It's about to finish up, and there our processing is complete. We'll go to our next step where we use Tools, Align Image Sequence. We'll add those files that we just made in ImPPG. So again, we're going to go select all those files, bring them in. We will crop to intersection and stabilize on high contrast features. Make a folder. We'll call this Aligned. Select that folder and start processing. And with a short animation such as this of only 70 frames, this does not take long for it to look at each, evaluate each, and then align the frames. We've got those ready to go. Now what I do is I will take them into Photoshop, where I do a little bit more processing. May rotate this so that it's horizontal, bring out some additional prom features with some shadows, and maybe do a little cropping of areas I don't need. So we will move on to the next step then. Once I have all of my images aligned, I go to Photoshop. Now, this is a step you can skip depending upon how much processing you wish to do to your final images. I like to bring it into Photoshop to do things such as maybe crop some, rotate the image, or bring up some certain features like proms by using shadows. So if you don't need to do that or use other processing, that's fine. I'm going to walk through it real quick. I'll just go and open one file from that file on the west. Where they were aligned. So I'll pick one image, bring it in. And what I do in Photoshop is I build an action so that I can batch process all of this. So I'm going to add an action. I'm going to call it West Limb. And I just hit record. First thing I do is go to Image, Rotation, and we're going to turn it 90 degrees counterclockwise. So it's horizontal. Now that's might be all I would do, but I could actually crop. So I could bring this down a little bit because I don't need that much. Maybe bring in the side just a little bit. Crop that. The next thing I want to check and make sure is if there's some hidden prominence material in here. So in this case, I open my camera raw filter. And I want to bring up shadows. And you can see there's some fine material that wouldn't show otherwise. So I usually do that. I may dehaze it just a little bit. And I'll say OK. Then I will bring up levels and move the black point just a little bit. Say OK. I'm going to save this image. Save as. I'll make a new folder. Save that image in there. Save. And then stop the action. And I'm done with that portion. I'll get rid of that image. Then I don't want to duplicate it. So I'm going to go back to my files here. And I'm going to get rid of the one that I made so it doesn't get duplicated. Stop that. And back to Photoshop. This is where I go to File, Automate, Batch. And I pick the file. They were in a line. Select that. And where they're going to is the test. So go to the test file, select that, hit OK, and it will start making all those changes to those images. And we won't wait for this to finish it, but once this is done, all of those files will be adjusted the same way I did that first image, and they'll be ready to make into the animation. So I'll pause the animation here. The next step, once we've adjusted the images in Photoshop, where I did the cropping and raised some shadows, etc., the final program we're going to use is called PIPP. It's a free source program. A lot of planetary imagers utilize this product as well. However, we're going to use this to produce the GIF. We're going to go and select the files we just adjusted in Photoshop. So we'll select all of those and bring them in. You'll get some pop-ups that you can ignore. And the next step we'll go to is the animation options. We want it to play forward. Then output, we're going to do an animated GIF. And then frames per second, depending upon the type of animation you're doing. If you're recording like a very quiescent prom and there's not a lot of movement, you may want to go as high as like 15 to 20 frames per second in order to see some actual movement. In the case of this animation, there was a lot of activity within 45 minutes. So I want to slow things down a little bit. So I won't use that high. I'm going to use 8 frames per second in this case so that the animation plays fairly smoothly. And once you've selected your frames per second, you just click on Do Processing and then Start Processing. It will not take long for a short animation like this. It forms the GIF. You can review that. Take a look here. Got some nice activity with some surge prominences happening. A bit of activity on an AR that's leaving the limb at this point in time. So I'm pretty happy with this. At this point, you can name your file, save it wherever you want to. And then there's a variety of ways of posting these. I post on AstroBin. You can also turn this into an MP4 with a product such as Handbrake to save room, because an MP4 is much smaller than a GIF. So hopefully this has been beneficial for you, and I appreciate you taking the time to watch this tutorial. Thanks again. Good imaging.